Let me hit
Yeah.
record. Sweet.
Yeah.
And obviously this is, it's not live. So if you get a call or something crazy happens, we can pause it, go from there.
Cool.
Right on. Well, we'll go ahead and kick this. Oh yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
Let me, I just realized, let me plug in my laptop just so I don't go dark.
Cool. Well, we should get going again here. Perfect. Okay. Cool. Welcome to this week's episode. I'm here in Zoom land with my man, Mike Umbro, oil and gas entrepreneur, investor, and environmental leader. Mike currently holds a few positions, including principal at FieldView Capital, VP of Corporate Development at RL Environmental, and CFO of Premier Resource Management. Mike, welcome to the show, my man. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm stoked to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet, man. It's funny you say stoked. That was a word growing up where I'm from too. So I often say, and people are like, man, you must be from up north somewheres or the West Coast. West Coast of Canada. But no, I'm excited to have you on. I hate to always say I've been following you for a long time, but I've really been I've admired what you've done for our industry for a long time, the content you produce. It's super cool. But to kind of kick things off, where are you visiting from today? Or where are you at today?
I'm in my office at home today. I'm born and raised in San Diego, and I've been commuting up to Bakersfield for probably 10 plus years now. So I've been kind of doing this work from home thing since 2008. So I'm here at home.
Yeah, no, that's good. So, okay. So then, I mean, that leads me to like an obvious question. So before the pandemic, because now it's just the norm, right? Like this isn't video published, but like you can see my kids' pictures in the background, it's not very polished. Whereas like yours is very nice and clean. And how would you describe working from home pre-pandemic to now post-pandemic?
Right. Yeah. It's changed a lot. Pre-pandemic, I was in my garage. And then during the pandemic, we were like, we had another baby. We have 3 kiddos. So it was like, okay, I can't really work in the garage long-term. So we did a little renovation and turned the breakfast nook into my office and the kitchen over here. So I think for me, it's changed physically from the garage to inside, but it's been interesting because I did start in 2008 working, for myself. I started FieldView then, which I still, operate and kind of hang my Series 79 and investment banking shingle through that entity. And it took me, granted, I was 25 at the time. It took me probably 4 or 5 years just to figure out how to work from home. So I've kind of been in awe of a lot of folks that I interact with now, that they're able to just like seamlessly work from home. And I guess the digital tools and the Zoom and all the applications have evolved over the past 15 years, but it took me a long time to get used to. I don't know how it's been for you, but it took me like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I would say, I think it's dependent on whether or not you have kids, right? Like for me, I'm such a people person. So I love being engaged with people. Like I get energized when I'm around groups of people, going to the office, bouncing around from office to office, going for coffee meetings, that's just who I am. And so when, the whole pandemic, working from home, it allowed me to quote unquote be more productive behind a computer screen. So I could knock out work, really effectively and quickly, as long as my kids weren't in here. But so it was good. What it did is the biggest challenge for me was going from work mode to dad and husband mode. Because it was like, typically I would have that, 30 to 45 minutes of traffic on the way home. And it would allow me to just sort of disconnect, recalibrate, shift from work mode to dad mode or husband mode, but going from in my little workstation here at home to then like I would get up and my kids would be there just like, are you done? Yeah. It was like, can I go into the closet and just chill for like 10 minutes?
Exactly.
Brain, and it was hard to like make that pivot really quickly.
Right.
I'm a huge believer of it. Kind of the answer lies somewhere in the middle. And again, it's totally job dependent. I have a brother-in-law. He could literally isolate himself for 30 days straight, work from 8 to 5, whatever, behind his computer screen, not leave his house and be completely happy with that. I just cannot do that. So it just, I guess it's personal dependence, but there was an adjustment period. Now I'm grateful because I can have formal meetings with my kids' drawings in the back, and I can, wear a t-shirt and a hat if I need to. And people are like, it's just, that's the norm. So
exactly.
Yeah.
The casual nature of things is nice.
Yes, it certainly is. Well, I'm pumped to have you on, Mike. And it's, I'm curious to, even oil prices are down today, our spirits are high, but, and I mentioned it earlier, is like, you have a very sort of kind approach to, in the way that you deliver your message. And I'm curious, like, where does that come from? Because like in all your pictures, you're smiling, you're charismatic. And I mean, not to like, fluff your toque, as we say, but I'm curious, because someone typically that's been in oil and gas, very rigid, kind of, you know what I mean? And so I'm curious kind of like where that character kind of trait comes from, because I think it's super contagious and very admirable.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I guess I guess I'm good at hiding my frustration, because a lot of me speaking out on started on LinkedIn was just born out of frustration, frankly, because we've been I keep this little bottle of oil. This is from our first production. And the date says, it says PRM, it says opaque, which is the name of our lease. We didn't name it that. I think it's an awful name to name an oil field opaque. But anyway, it's 11/23 of 18. And this is our first oil produced when we returned, 3 legacy wells on production. We have 8 old wells out there, but 2018, that's, going on 5 years where we still haven't been able to drill our first well. We're pumping these old crummy wells. And so I just got to a point where I thought, if I don't say something about what's going on in California, and I see a lot of similarities to what's been going on the past 5 years to what's now being rolled out to DC and globally. And we can, get into that wherever you want to go with it. But I just realized, if I don't start getting some, in a weird way, the likes on LinkedIn kind of help me to keep going initially anyway. It's like, okay, wow, people really care about this. And then it kind of evolved to where I realized, well, I need to go take my phone out in the lease and do videos and just have fun with it. Even though the process at times is not very fun of trying to get your project developed. So I guess it's just kind of, I'm a glass half full kind of person. I see a lot of positive incentives for entrepreneurs and independent producers if they're willing to accept the risk that comes along with that. So it's weird, because I've never been more excited about the industry, but I've also, never been more frustrated trying to do something. So
no, I can imagine. And I mean, there's obviously several different directions we can take, based off that response. And the first one that comes to mind is, again, I grew up in British Columbia. And so there's a lot of initiatives in British Columbia to, move away from fossil fuels. And so and again, agree or not for the audience, like I tend to sort of relate California to British Columbia. There's a lot of similarities through my observation and experience growing up there. Now, I haven't lived in California, but knowing enough about it, having friends there and stuff like that, there's just a lot of similarities from a cultural perspective. And then, for me going in when I was 18 to Alberta, totally different. Right. It's kind of, it's like going from California to Texas in a way. I just sort of the parallel that I make, to where everyone was pro, oil and gas, very much into fossil fuels. Well, then I went to Pennsylvania in 2010 when the Marcellus Shale kicked off, and everyone, when I arrived there, said, "Hey, be careful. Like, people aren't really into this fracking thing." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean? Like, we need oil and gas, don't we? Like, why would people, like, for me, it was just kind of like, well, what, I don't get it. Right. And it was maybe ignorance or just product of my environment. But growing up, it wasn't, I didn't have any family in the oil field and anything else. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. So I wasn't really exposed to like the divisiveness. And then, so again, fast forward, go to the Marcellus Shale. It was like, I'd sit down. Oh, you have a funny accent. Where are you from? Oh, I'm from Alberta. What do you do?
Yeah.
I'm in energy. Oh, and then the first thing they say was, or do you work for like the utility company, like electricity? I'm like, no, I'm like drilling. And they're
Right.
like, oh, you're one of those frackers. And I
Yeah.
quickly realized like, okay, wow, how I deliver my message can really
Right.
sort of dictate the conversation here. Like, and
For
so I'm
sure.
curious for you growing, being where you are,
Mhm.
and maybe there's like a bubble where you're at, but I would say
Yeah.
generally speaking, people are anti-fossil fuel. Again, I'm speaking in generalities, but
Right.
how do you then sort of approach that? And how do you sort of initiate conversations
Mhm.
leading with kindness instead of like, I always say honey makes a lot is better than pouring vinegar. How do
Right.
you sort of navigate that?
I think the biggest thing is for me is just inviting people. We just did in California, we have the California Independent Petroleum Association, and we did a fundraiser. The annual meeting was in San Diego. So I said, hey, let me have a party at my house. And we did that about a month ago. And I told, SIPA, I said, hey, if we're going to do this at my house, I'm going to invite all my friends, my family, my wife's friends, our friends, everybody. And we need to open up this dialogue to other people. I feel like our industry, we're so secretive. Like you
Yeah.
own the lease. Who cares? Like go out there and put a video camera out there and invite people into what you're doing. Unless you're doing something bad, in which case you probably shouldn't. But nine
Mm.
times out of 10, especially in California with our regulations, you go out to a lease and it looks really clean. And I think it just goes back to this idea of inviting people into your industry and your world. Being in San Diego, growing up here, I had no idea about the oil and gas industry. My dad was in the grocery business. My mom was a teacher. I have no connections to the oil and gas space other than one of my first jobs was with a firm in La Jolla trying to start an upstream MLP. So I was trying to, basically dial for production, calling mom and pop operators, middle market operators, seeing if we could buy production. And, I quickly realized from my vantage point in San Diego that I had no preconceived notion of what the industry was. This was back in 2007. There wasn't this crazed Green New Deal movement. Like it was just kind of normal. And I thought, wow, the people in this industry are really nice people.
Mm.
Everybody I got on the phone was like open to talking. They wouldn't shut you down. And that's what drew me into the industry was actually, I guess being forced in a way to call on people. But then I quickly realized, hey, these people are warm people. They're nice people. They're good people. And I've been in the industry since, so 15
Mm.
years. And I think that's what most people don't know about our industry is it's so family oriented. It's
Yeah.
so, community driven. And I mean, it gives me like chills right now just talking about it. Like for example, my first meetings with my now partners in this oil field, they wanted to have dinner with all of our wives. And I'm like, well, I got a 6-month-old boy. Do you really want, a baby at dinner? Like, yes, bring him.
Yeah.
And, all your partners' wives are taking turns holding the baby. And we're not these images that the media portrays of these bad people destroying the environment. It's actually quite the opposite. And so,
Right.
I guess long way to answer the question, but I think the biggest thing we need to do is just invite those that are not in the industry to see what we're doing on a, actually on a project by project basis, rather than just kind of, saying, hey, we need energy, we need it.
Yes.
So you need us. I think, and I think my friends walked away from that night, I don't know how many conversations they had with industry professionals, but they were given the opportunity. And then they were
Yes.
also given the chance to see, like, oh, oil and gas, oh, they drink margaritas too. And oh, they like, we had a reggae artist there. It's like, yeah, I made sure
Yeah.
it's not just, country music. We
Right.
listen to all kinds of stuff. And so those are kind of the steps that I'm trying to take to, just spread a little awareness in, my pocket of the world. And
Yeah.
particularly now when everybody's asking about it, when prices are high
Yes.
and supply is coming from Russia and Saudi and all these bad places.
Right.
So,
No, times right now presents such an opportunity to educate and inform. And like, I have a ton, our close social circle here, and I'm in Houston, is actually not oil and gas. And my wife's, she's deep in the commercial real estate investment world. A lot of folks from North Carolina, California, Virginia. And
right.
so it's been interesting because a lot of her connections on LinkedIn have then followed me, and I try to do a good job to educate and without it being combative. Like, I'm so anti that, but
Right.
I've had folks reach out. I actually had a gentleman on my podcast, and you know who he's from Oklahoma, had never been exposed to oil and gas, but he listened to a couple of my episodes, and his mindset completely shifted from, because he grew up in an environment that was anti-oil and gas. It became political. Don't vote for this side because they just want to make money.
Right.
And like, it was just like, again, that was just the reality. And so, but what I can appreciate is the gentleman had an open mind to listen. And he said, you know what, like, I have such a different understanding now of oil and gas. And I actually would consider like either entering that, that field, into the oil and gas industry as a career. Like I see the need for it. People like you've kind of helped change my mind. And I'm like, if I can change that person's mind, and not even necessarily change their mind, but at least inform them to where they can draw their own conclusions instead of taking small bits and then applying it to a very complex problem. Because that's the challenge, right? It's like headline read, draw conclusion, apply it to a problem that no one really understands, the true complexities of what we're dealing with right now. And if they do, then, good for them. But at the end of the day, I think what you said is just like, it takes educating people. And if we can sort of inform in a nice way, I think it could make a huge difference. And actually, it's funny you mentioned, that event that you referenced, because I saw the post. I thought it was super cool. And there was something that you'd said in your post, and I'll say it in quotes. It said, as an industry, we need to bring life to every barrel, make a personal connection between your life's passion, your family, and your community. I'd love for you to explain what that means.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that you brought that up, because I think it's so important. I think, a lot of people as an industry, we almost work against ourselves in some respects, because some people, like, you'll post something online and people will be like, don't you understand it's a global market? And it's like, okay, thanks, buddy. I am aware of that. But I think, do I think that my lease in Kern County, 560 acres, we think we have 50 to 70 million barrels in place? We don't know, because we haven't been able to drill our first well. Do I think that our lease is going to somehow change global pricing or change the global commodity market? No, I'm not naive. But I can tell people, look, since 2018, we've spent about $2 million addressing 40 violations from the prior operator, even though we've only got 8 legacy wells. You can do, if you're not a a sound operator, you can do some environmental damage. So we've spent a tremendous amount of money cleaning up what was there prior to us. The state has accepted our money for our bond to go and drill. The state will accept your money for permits, but they'll hold you back. And what that holds back is the economic engine of a community. And when it comes to Kern County, 70% of California's domestic production is produced in Kern County. Kern County in 2019 received $200 million in property taxes from Kern County oil production. They received less than $2 million from solar operators, because solar in California, they don't pay the increase in property value after they put their infrastructure on the land. So they're paying property taxes on dirt in the middle of the desert that's essentially worthless without the solar on top. So we can kind of go into that discussion of, well, who's really subsidized and who's really, paying their way in these communities. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it for us, on a personal side, one of my partners has cancer, and I probably shouldn't divulge, personal health issue, but, my two partners are both, in their early 60s now, started in their late 50s. They saw this project as something that is, kind of their crowning achievement in oil and gas. They've both been working for, major operators in California and internationally. They're really great people, really good at what they do. And that's a personal connection that if I don't bring it up on your show, nobody's going to know that. But here's someone that's spending 4 years of their life, in their later part of their career, trying to do something good for their family, for their community. And if we don't talk about the toll that takes on people's mental health, we can maybe relay that to people that are losing jobs on a rig crew when the market goes down, or losing jobs building the Keystone XL pipeline, these quote unquote good paying union jobs, and bringing the personal side of that barrel of oil to the forefront and say, these are people's lives, these are people's, people are putting hundreds of thousands of dollars of their retirement money into their own projects, because the United States is a democratic society, is somewhere that is built on entrepreneurial spirit. And the policies right now that are being pushed upon our industry are anti-American and anti-progress, if we want to use that buzzword. They're quite regressive. And if we don't bring the stories of our business partners, of our families, trying to bring these barrels to our local market, then the media is not going to cover that. Nobody's going to cover that. So if we don't do it, we just die on the vine. We just get shut out of our production. We get our property taken from us by regressive policies. And then all of our neighbors suffer from high prices, and they're told to actually vilify our domestic industry. They're told that we are the people making the environment dirty, and they're told the exact opposite of what's actually happening on the ground. And so, there's a lot in that statement that I made from a personal perspective of just my, emotional pain of seeing, partners get sick, or seeing other families lose jobs and struggling for paychecks, and just saying, hey, we need to be loud and proud about what we're doing. It's not helping us by sitting on the sidelines and allowing the mainstream media to just create the narrative and just go with it. And so that's a little bit about, what that statement was intended to portray.
Yeah, no, and I knew there was some serious depth to that, because when I read it, it really resonated. And so, I'm curious. In your response, you mentioned energy policy, and in we're in a sort of a state right now of regression instead of progress. But I mean, the biggest question to me is why, right? It's like it seems obvious when you do a little digging, and I always say, do your own damn research, right? And anyone who has a fundamental understanding of economics has a very good idea of what's going on. But the reality is most people don't, right? I mean, most people barely know how to balance a checkbook, let alone understand energy economics. But with people, and especially in the administration, like you see a lot of folks that represent a large portion of the government making statements that make me scratch my head. And I try to approach it with empathy, to think like their intent, I believe, and I believe in mankind, to think that everyone's trying to do the right thing. But like, why do you think we are in that state? And why is it that, there is such a push away from it when, like we're talking about, gas stations are price gouging, and the oil companies, like, why are they doing this? But then when you do a little research, it's like, well, we're so underinvested right now, and we can't find people. Margins are razor thin on the oil field service side already. So it's, it's to scale up, to find people when we can barely, charge, fair market value for our services. because we've been beat down right, because of, just the environment that we've been in economically on the oil and gas industry. It's like, I always laugh. I'm like, if we want to get out of this mess, like maybe we should, maybe the government should bail out oil companies right now. I don't know.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm kind of joking because that would just create an uproar, but like but I guess going back to the question, it seems obvious to myself, but do you maybe have an idea as to why it is the way it is in this big anti-movement? I mean, can you kind of summarize, or at least from your perspective, give an idea?
Yeah. And I don't mean to talk only about California, but it's what I know best. And I truly believe that what we're seeing in California is the exact playbook that's rolled out in DC. And I know that's a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, but it's one of the reasons I'm speaking out so much, because it's coming to you, Permian Basin. It's coming to you, Marcellus. It's coming to the Bakken. It's coming everywhere. Right. And what I think it is, I think on the environmental progress side of the house, I think I call it, they count carbon like calories. I think there's this over infatuation with counting how much carbon is in the atmosphere and somehow measuring our carbon emissions as a bellwether for how we're doing to address environmental conditions. And I think it's really starting to unravel. And for us in California, what that means is, well, we need to reduce our carbon footprint. So we need to phase out fossil fuel production in California first. And I think it's the exact opposite, because what we're doing is we're offshoring the production, whether it's oil and gas or whether it's 40% of the nation's imports coming through the port of LA and Long Beach. And we're just outsourcing production of everything: televisions, car parts, clothing, everything. We're pushing it all to China, and we're pushing the oil production to OPEC and Ecuador and other places, because it makes us feel good that it's not in our own backyard, the whole NIMBY mantra. But when you look at the data, yes, you can see places where carbon emissions are coming down, but the pollution at the port of LA and Long Beach, that port is the single largest source of pollution in all of Southern California. And it combines for more pollution than all of our vehicles in Southern California. So even if you live in a fantasy land where we go fully electric on our vehicles, you're not going to do that with ships. You're not going to do that with the heavy trucks that are hauling all our freight out of the port. So what it does is it creates more particulate matter in our disadvantaged communities. It creates more SOx, more NOx, more pollutants. And these pollutants are not tracked as greenhouse gases. So the policymakers, I don't believe the policymakers are doing enough homework from a fully, all-encompassing environmental progress perspective. It's just, let me see, in California, we've got a supermajority on the left. So what they do, these climate activist groups will score how the politicians are voting on these bills. And if they're not voting to phase out domestic production, they get dinged by these activists. And you'll get a challenge in the next primary season if you don't vote the way these activist groups want you to vote. And I think that is being kind of extrapolated out to Washington, DC. And you see it in the mantras. They're very similar. They say, okay, well, we shouldn't be fracking. California's resources really a dwindling. It's in decline. It's a dirty barrel of oil because it takes, natural gas to fire the steam generators to push steam downhole. And so there's this greater carbon intensity. They use all of these talking points to shut down local production in the name of progress. But what we're seeing is record amounts of pollution. in our communities. So I say, who cares about the carbon if now Black and brown communities suffer from asthma and lung cancer because diesel particulate matter or SOx and NOx actually hurts your lungs, And so I think there's, and that's not a popular thing. I could never run for office because, I would rather talk about the science than, just kind of the buzzwords on the policy front. So I think there's just a huge amount of, copycat policies going on, and a real lack of scientific study and a real lack of encouraging local domestic production, because it's just not the flavor of the day today. It's not what the politicians can win on, so they think.
Right.
So they don't want to support local operators.
Yeah, no, it's you're like shifting pollution around is kind of what it comes down to. And it's rather frustrating. But again, like, you have to put yourself in other people's shoes sometimes to think, okay, well, is because I always try to look at both sides. Right. And it's important to, regardless of whatever position you stand behind, it's a good to at least consider, opposing views. But going back to, you said you never, get into politics or whatever, but maybe that's something that's needed, is someone like yourself that does focus on the science. And maybe it wouldn't win votes, I don't know. David DRW always, I think he'd be a hell of a politician,
right?
But and I don't know if he can, because he can. I think he's mentioned it before. He can run for, he can't run for president, obviously, because he's Canadian,
right?
But I've heard him oftentimes even look at the economics between, if he was to run, how much money he'd have to spend, and he has a thesis as to why he shouldn't. But I always like, man, you need to, like,
right?
Why not?
Yeah, he absolutely should.
Yeah, it'd be hilarious. I've known David for a long time, and I respect him a lot for the voice that he has and how he's battled LinkedIn for the last like 4 years.
Totally. No,
his passion is, yeah. So I want to pivot just a little bit and ask more again on the personal side of things. So kind of taking our mind a little bit away from that. But I noticed, you got the Sale jersey in the background. So I suspect you're a football fan, or perhaps maybe him. I don't know. But
I did. Yeah, I did.
Oh, okay. So talk about that. Yeah, for the folks listening, and I'm going to take a picture of this and post it on LinkedIn to help create awareness around the episode. But yeah, you've got a jersey in the background. I suspect it's important to you.
Yeah. So my junior is an Oceanside guy. So North County, San Diego, local legend, obviously. One of my best friends growing up, his mom is a physical trainer, athletic trainer, not kind of weightlifting, more body alignment. And she works with Padres, Chargers, big name athletes. But cool. She would run and still does, but runs programs where summer camps and other things, when these athletes are in their off season, they come and train with her. And all of us hacks are out there training too. And, it's very focused on stretching, alignment, core exercises, core strength. And then you kind of finish with, running a hill we call puke hill, and running, nice. Running all these programs that are pretty gnarly exercise, but everybody can participate. And, Junior was one of those people that just always a happy guy, like, hey, what's up, buddy? He would call everybody buddy. And, when he'd have us at his house in Oceanside beachfront, and, partying with him and his family and friends, and just such a special person in our community. And we've really lost a great voice and a great leader in our community. But I put it on my wall because it's real. He had nothing but 120% motor. Like, that was what was so cool about watching him play, is every play he was going as fast as he could. And every play he was, and the Chargers weren't that good. I mean, we went to one Super Bowl with him, then he left for the Dolphins, and then he went to a Super Bowl with the Patriots, and he never got a ring, unfortunately, but he always had that motor. And so for me, I put it up in my office just to kind of remind myself to, don't get down, don't get down with a losing season, and don't get down with a defeat in what you're doing, whether it's a personal project or a work project or whatever, because you allow your competition to start gaining ground on you. And so that's why I keep it back there.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. And, unfortunately, due to, he obviously went through some serious challenges. And was it in 2012? Is that when he committed suicide?
It was somewhere around there. Yeah.
Okay.
Somewhere around there. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, that's that's sad on so many different levels, but what a cool reminder. And so I didn't realize where he was from, and kind of the unique story behind that. I always enjoyed watching him. But so for you being in San Diego, I'm sure very outdoorsy, lots of, there's probably not a lack of resources to enjoy yourselves if you like the outdoors and just being active. But I'm curious, what does an ideal Friday night look like for Mike Umbro? And that could be, if you had an opportunity to travel, you could teleport, you have as much resources you want, as much money as you want. But if you could just like create the ideal Friday night, what would that look like to you?
Yeah. I'm trying to do, well, it's going to be Saturday, but I'm trying to do an ideal Saturday night this Saturday. My wife and I are going to go to Bayfest, which is a reggae show down at the San Diego Bay. Nice. And actually the musician we had, her name's Vanalia, at our party for SIPA. She's performing with a bunch of big bands, Iration and other kind of big names in the industry. But the ideal scenario, if it goes as planned Saturday, is to hang out. We have 3 kids, 3 little ones, and to hang out at the beach during the day, go down there and just kind of look at the tide pools and explore and have fun, and then drop them off. My parents live 5 doors up the street, so we're really fortunate to have grandma and grandpa up there, and my wife's parents live close by. So get them handed off to to grandma and grandpa to get spoiled for the evening, and then go down to the bay and just dance and have fun and relax, and forget about the fact that I can't drill a well and it's not my timeline, and just kind of unwind and release from the industry and the LinkedIn or the Twitter sphere or whatever it is. I'm kind of engaged in both, but just to kind of forget about all that, maybe post a video to Twitter. I kind of post more personal stuff on there, a little more edgy.
Yes. Hey, but, that's a good space for it.
But yeah, I think especially, with kids now, it's finding that time alone with your spouse is really important. And I don't do enough of that. A lot of times I'll drive up to Bakersfield and spend the night and work a couple days and come home. And then it's like, you're just managing the kiddos with each other, and you don't really get to hang out. So I think my ideal night now is just having time with the kids, but then having time alone and just enjoying, ourselves alone.
Yeah. Well, that's so important. And especially anyone who's tied to, whether it be oil and gas or markets or finance, is just nonstop. Right. And it's like, because, energy is global. So, you can see what's going on all the time. Right. And it's easy to just get sucked in and never want to leave. And that's one thing that, my wife and I have every relationship has challenges, but just like for me, especially drilling operations, we're drilling 24/7, 365. And so it's, there's always someone to call or reports to look at, text messages to respond to, because it may be 10 at night and no one gives a crap if I'm sitting watching Stranger Things with my wife. If we're losing returns, I need to come up with a solution. And it's like, oh yeah, no. And it was interesting because early on in my career, she was like, don't they know you're like not working right now? And it was like, it took a while. It was like, no, like this is like nonstop. Like I can't, like if I tell them to wait 2 hours, like that ain't gonna fly.
Exactly.
But I say that to say it's spending that quality time, with your spouse, to me is part of the reason why I've been able to be successful, is to have that support system.
Totally.
Because then, if I put in the effort to make sure, that we're working on our relationship, having that time together, making, taking care of each other's needs from a relationship standpoint, then when I need to go do things or I need to travel, I don't feel like I have to look over my shoulder. Like, is she about to like come pummel me in the back of the head because she's so mad that I'm leaving again? It's like, no, like, I understand, like, do what you got to do. I know, it's having that support allows me to go throughout my day without stressing about what's going on at home. But it takes work, and having those times, like you said, is extremely important. So I encourage you to, man. It's, no one ever looks back when they're on their deathbed saying, I wish I would have worked a little harder. They always say, I wish I would have spent more time with the loved ones, because that's what ultimately matters. Right.
Absolutely.
You mentioned reggae. I'm sensing a theme here. Like, tell me a little bit about that, man. Is that kind of the flavor of music for you, or what?
I think, growing up in San Diego, it's hard, it wasn't a country music scene down here. Let's just say
neither is the Okanagan Valley, man. So I get it. I've yet to buy a pair of cowboy boots, and I've had many people try to convince me to buy some.
Right. No, but you know what I'm noticing now, that like, as you get a little older and you start to listen to the lyrics and you start to listen to what these artists are singing about, there's one song that comes to mind called Fear Factor. And it's all about how the media and the government is just trying to maintain this perpetual state of fear to control us. There's another song I listened to these all just kind of come on my Pandora, but Mind Control. And I was like, when was this released? Is this guy like prophetic? But it was released in 2021. So I figure it was like, he's getting pissed off about all this pandemic stuff. And it's all about, and then there's the artist I mentioned, Vanalia. She was discovered doing cover songs of her favorite band, which is Pepper, which is a pretty well-known reggae ska style band from when we were growing up. But that's how she was actually discovered. And so I kind of relate to that, because I'm like, the only reason people know me is because I start posting stuff online, like, I'm nobody. I haven't even drilled my first well yet. Like, but all of her music is about, believing in yourself, overcoming the obstacles. And I think there's kind of this misconception about reggae that it's just a bunch of people getting baked, like eating Cheetos and like listening to good beats, which of course there is that side of it. But when you really listen to, there's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of songs about faith. There's a lot of songs about perseverance. There's a lot of songs about overcoming challenges. And it resonates with me. A lot of the music right now, that really resonates with me right now, and trying to do something and, paint a vision of what your goals look like and then make that happen. And a lot of what I'm hearing right now, is about that. And there's a lot of love in that style of music, and not a lot of hate. It's not, rap, it's like hate and guns and violence and all this like, bad stuff. And, reggae is something I can, put on in the house and my kids will dance to. And, generally there's not a lot of bad language. And so music has definitely, like, I have zero musical capability, but it's definitely something that's helped me manage the emotions and the mental challenges. Quite frankly, mental health is a big deal. And in our industry, I can't help but think there's probably a lot of people really hurting right now, and these high prices I think maybe cover that up, but I think there's a lot of people from 2015 to 2021 that really haven't had a good 5 or 6 years, and just need to see positivity. And maybe that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about having a positive outlook and smiling in videos and having fun. And nobody wants to be a downer. Like, no one's drawn to like the Debbie Downer in the corner. So we just kind of have to lift people up.
Yeah. It's interesting. I made a post on LinkedIn, and it was a picture of me back when I was 18 years old, on the first drilling rig I worked on. And I said on the post, I said, I wasn't always the smartest rig hand. I wasn't always the biggest. I wasn't the strongest, and
Mm-hmm.
I said, but what I always did, because typically, on a drilling rig, again, from my experience, it was a bunch of negativity. It was who can verbally undress the person to make fun of them and make themselves feel good. And it just, I didn't come from that. I came from like wakeboarding, snowboarding, happy, like love life and, party and everyone's happy, to where then like I'm going on this iron jungle and everyone's like, I hate my life. I'm divorced. I pay child support. I have a big jacked up truck, again, speaking in generalities, but I was like, whoa, like, you guys need some positivity in your life. And they're like, go back to BC, buddy, go smoke some more weed. I'm like, no, it's just like, you seriously. And so in the post, I said, I always had a way of like making people laugh. And I always tried to spread, good vibes. And at first, it kind of pissed people off. They're like, you're annoying. Like, this isn't you. Like, this is just like you're trying to
don't be happy on the rig.
Yeah. Right. But like, that was who I was. And so after people realized like, oh no, you're like this every day. Like, you're not like this just because, you woke up one day on the right side of the bed. Like, and then people would laugh, but then eventually like, how are you so happy all the time? And it's about perspective. And again, I think part of that's genetically predisposition. My mom could literally get run over by a bus and she would find the silver lining around it somehow. So it's part of that comes from her. But in our industry, I find even, even in the office, sometimes it's very much like pessimistic, and whether oil prices are up or down, someone's complaining and bitching and upset about something. And it's just like, if we could kind of build, and then with that, through osmosis, people associate people in oil and gas. It was like rugged, mean, upset all the time, and the world's against us, and like, I think culturally, like, we have to shift that, because I can tell you right now, people thinking of getting into college are not thinking, I want to go work for an oil and gas company. Like, it's quite the opposite. And so on a macro level, talking to people is just like, how can we position ourselves as people that an industry that people want to come work for. Like, we're not that attractive. And oil and gas, and energy in general is not the sexiest industry to get into, like, we have family friends that are, with younger kids, and it's like, what do you want to do? And they want to get into tech. They want to be YouTubers. They want to be gamers. Some are like, oh, I want to be an engineer. But it was interesting. I went to my daughter's kindergarten graduation, and it's here in Katy, Texas, which is where we are, just west of Houston. 99.9% of my neighbors are oil and gas. And so I went and did this daddy thing at, for whatever. And I got to ask everyone, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And not a single one said, I want to be like, mommy or daddy in oil and gas. They were like,
oh no.
It was interesting. Right. And
that is interesting.
And there was like, I want to be like this one dude, few of the boys wanted to be like professional football players. Right. And then some of the girls like, oh, I want to go to the Olympics. But then the ones, thought it was like, I want to be a doctor, a policeman, this and that. And in kindergarten, there's, they kind of have this like unique, just kind of innocent way of life. And this is, I want to be a doctor. And it's okay. But none of them were, like, oh, I want to do what my dad does. And even if you talk to parents around here, a lot of them even say, I don't want my kid doing petroleum engineering, or I don't want my kid to get into oil and gas. And it's like that to me is a problem, right? It's like, shouldn't we be
a big problem?
Yeah. It's like, and so it's I think culturally, I think there needs to be a shift, and how we get there, I don't know, but I think conversations like this, I mean, we should make hats, like make oil and gas cool again. You know what I mean?
Right.
Come on.
Oh, I must have my kids brainwashed, because like I'll walk by my daughter's room and she's playing with her unicorns and ponies, and I'll hear her say, I'm going to Bakersfield. And it's like, nice. I tell them I have a boy and two girls. One, our youngest is 1, and then our middle is 3.5, and then my boy's almost 5. But I'll be like, you want to be an oil man like daddy, or you want to be in oil like daddy, to both, my two older kids. They're like, yeah, we want to do it. And so, my nice. Dream would be to get our project off the ground. And, I don't think there's going to be people lining up to buy an oil field in California. So, I would love them to run it if they want to do that. And I think
that would be so cool.
Yeah. I think maybe because I'm speculating, but maybe some of the they work for bigger companies, and, I would not want to be, like take Chevron, for example, in Kern County. it seems like every other month they're reorganizing, they're laying off a third of the people, moving a third of the people to Midland, and then, reshuffling a third of the people. It's like these people barely get settled in a role, and 12 months later they're gone, or they're in another role. And I could see that. I think the industry, especially now with this work from home and everybody wants flexibility, and maybe that's a window for the bigger companies in the industry to shift and be more accommodating, I hope. Right. But I could see why some folks would be like, oh man, I don't want my kids to do what daddy or mommy does, because mommy and daddy might not like it or whatever.
Yeah, no. And it's, there's, again, I have neighbors work for Shell, BP, Oxy. So it's, a lot of them, and through time, like I've seen multiple families have to move because they got laid, the husband or the wife got laid off. So as growing up as a kid, you see your mom and daddy stressed, and it's like, oh, here we go again, this other cycle. And it's I think a lot of it too is the stability, right? Like you talk to most people, and I'm extremely grateful and fortunate. I have not been laid off through any of the downturns, but it's rare, right?
Right, absolutely.
And so, but if you're a child, let's say you're growing up in an environment where mommy and daddy are doing well, thriving, able to go on vacation, do this, do that. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, sorry, like daddy doesn't have his job. And it's like, well, why? It's like, oh, the oil cycle again or whatever. And then it's like, ooh, like that. I don't like that. That's kind of scary. So, I think the cyclical nature of our industry, and then, parents going through some challenging times, probably isn't very conducive for kids to be like, yeah, I want to do that too. So, again, it's complex challenge. It sounds like you're well on your way to creating some oil and gas, phenoms, but
maybe if we're allowed to do it, if we're allowed to produce our property, then we're good.
Well, why don't if you I think you mentioned a little bit about it, but describe again, just real brief, what it is that you're that asset that you have there, because I think it's kind of unique.
Yeah, very unique. So we are, as far as I know, we're the only operator, Premier Resource Management, in the state of California working on a greenfield development. So we do have 8 legacy wells from a prior operator, but they were more of a promoter, not really capable of developing a decent sized project. So we have about 560 acres leased on the west side of Kern County. So what's interesting about this area is, 70% of California's production is in Kern County. And I would say probably 70% of the Kern County production is on what we call the west side, which is an hour's drive west of Bakersfield, of actually where most people live. So we looked at this opportunity as something that was away from the coast. We didn't want to be in Ventura County, Santa Barbara County, Los Angeles basin, where you've got, a real push to end production in those places. And it'll likely get phased out there first. So we thought we were high grading these assets. Oh, we're going to be away from the coast. We're in Kern County where everybody supports us. And we're in an area where there's less than 6 inches of rain every year. So what that means is there's no aquifer for us to foul, even if we were to have some issue. We don't have diatomite. So in California, if you have diatomite, you'd be, fracking. We don't have any plans for hydraulic fracturing on this lease. So we spent some time. Now our CEO was 37 years at Chevron, reservoir engineer, built the Thermal Enhanced Oil Recovery Technology Center at Kern River, which is really an international hub where they train their staff on how to run a proper steam flood or thermal EOR. Yeah, his name's Jim Lederhaus. He's the smartest guy I've ever worked with, and I've learned more in the past 4 years than I have in the past 15 working with him. But he was identifying prospects, and we got together in 2018, and our other partner Lonnie is a petroleum engineer, and he's really just a wealth of information on the permitting side. And so we came together with the idea that we're going to start an oil company, and we're going to ideally ramp up to, 5,000-6,000 barrels a day of production and have a nice little operation going out there, create a lot of jobs, create a nice opportunity for us and our families to grow a business. And right now we are 4 years into the permitting process. And so we thought we would be producing, north of 1,000 barrels a day by now. And so it just goes to show that every model, whether it's a climate model or an economic model, is wrong. And, we're excited. We're still excited. We're very excited. We have 3 investors that came in. So we bootstrapped the operation for 2.5 years, putting our own money in. We put about 750,000 of the 3 of us, our own money. We weren't not paying ourselves. So that doesn't include sweat equity. That's cold, hard cash that we were putting into improving the lease, to returning some wells to production. And so right now we've got our programs written for 5 new wells that we'll drill as soon as the permit process opens back up in Kern County. And we think those first 5 wells will collectively bring us about 400 barrels a day. So we'll really go from nothing to, an oil company. And so I'm excited to go from an activist to an oil man at some point in time. And until then, I tell people, I'm like, look, if the state's not going to let me produce, then I'm going to spread the good news about our industry and just, bring it with science and facts in the meantime. So, so that's what we're up to.
Very cool. Well, you have my word. At some point, and regardless of whether you start producing or not, I'd love to take a trip out and see that field, and even just come out to California, man. We were there for spring break. I've got a good, really close friend who works for the Los Angeles Department of Utility, I believe. I'm not sure if the terminology is there, but he lives North Los Angeles. Cool. And I just had an absolute blast. Went to Huntington Beach, Laguna Beach, ripped around there. Just totally. I love the vibes out there. And my wife's been to San Diego. She had a great time, but would love to take a trip up there at some point.
You got to.
Yeah, most definitely. Look, I want to respect your time. I didn't realize we've blown through an hour here, but one last question before we close out here. Okay. Is there a message you'd like to relay, assuming, you have the ears of everyone in energy, or just everyone domestically, globally? If you could just relay a message to someone, what would that look like? And what would you say?
I think the overwhelming message that we need to spread is for people to speak out, and not in a way that produces noise, but in a way that you feel comfortable as an individual or as a leader in a company, empowering, energy professionals to have a voice and speak out. And I think one of the things that's really lacking in our industry is scientific white papers that show the benefits of domestic production from an environmental standpoint, from an economic standpoint. And I think we're starting to see that with, Mike Wirth of Chevron came out and wrote that letter about a week and a half ago that said, hey, President Biden, we're producing more than we ever have in our company's 142-year history. We're ramping up the Permian. We're doing everything we can. And I think it's important for the leaders of, E&P companies to empower their people to speak out. And that doesn't necessarily mean tweeting nasty things or, saying, oh, see, I told you so. We need this production, or see, I think we just really need to come together. And this is something that I'd like to do more personally is, we're writing letters to Newsom's administration to appeal for our project and kind of highlight the environmental benefits of what local production means. And so I think that's the biggest message that we can spread, as you have this awesome podcast, and as we're kind of talking, it's so cool to be able to have these conversations with people in the industry. And so I think the way we get it out is to, really just put our heads together, maybe spend some time writing a 3 to 5 page paper. And maybe that's co-authoring it and making it easy for people to kind of split up the work. Right. And I know a lot of people have a lot of, real work on their plate, but I think the public is starving for real information, for accurate information. And this whole Russia thing kind of spearheaded that and made people say, wait, where are we getting this from, and why are we getting it from these places? And so that's one thing I've done with kind of showing, hey, we're tamping down Kern County production in the middle of the desert that gets no rain, and we're importing it from the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador in the name of the environment, and it's backwards. Yeah. And so I think we need to just put facts and figures together and educate.
Wow. No, that's super powerful. And hopefully this message can be spread as far as the eye can see. So Mike, for those listening who want to connect, you don't have to spell it out, but you're active on, you said LinkedIn, Twitter, the new podcast.
And I'm real on Twitter. I'm not an anon.
You're not an anon.
I'm a real person.
I can appreciate that. I'm a big fan of, of energy, FinTwit, but, at the end of the day, I think, being who you are genuinely on Twitter is important. So are there any other, do you have any other channels or handles that you spread awareness around?
No, right now, Twitter and LinkedIn. I have a little YouTube channel. I haven't been posting as many videos on it. I called it Energy Fact Club with Mike Umbro. So I think if you search my name, it'll probably pop up. And Twitter and LinkedIn are just me, Mike Umbro. And I'm active developing a lease. And then I do work for an environmental company called RL Environmental. So liquid waste processing, sludge, water recycle, all that kind of fun stuff on the environmental side. So those are my main go-tos.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure and put all the links in the show notes. That way, if anyone wants to scroll down, click. I encourage everyone to connect with Mike. Just an absolute beauty. And Mike, thanks again. And always remember, for everyone out there, everyone deserves access to energy, and we is greater than me. Thanks, everybody.
I love